Welcome to another episode of the Expat Focus podcast. I'm your host, Carly, an Aussie living in France, and today's guest is an accidental social media influencer. American Casey Rose Burns has amassed a community of over 1 million people across TikTok and Instagram. And it all started with a little video she posted on her way to her new life in Italy. When I told a friend I was going to interview Casey, she said, I just want to meet her in Italy and eat gelato together. And that's exactly the vibe you get watching Casey's social media videos. We chat about what led her to leave her career in New York and move to Florence, Italian culture and food, including what you should never do to pasta, and some of the opportunities that have come her way thanks to her social media fame. Casey, thanks so much for joining me on the Expat Focus podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Now, having followed you on Instagram for the better part of the last year, I feel like I could have a pretty good crack at kind of explaining your most recent biography, but I'm not going to do that. For the benefit of our listeners, it's a little bit creepy, perhaps. Can you tell
No, it's
me,
not. I'm honored.
how about you tell me, how did you end up as an American in Italy?
Oh my gosh, yeah. Okay, so I went on a solo trip to Italy in 2018, for no other reason than I just felt a pull to go to Italy and was sick of waiting for somebody to go with, so I decided to go alone. And I did Venice, Florence, and Rome, and I also did Paris at the end. And I had a great trip. On my first day in Florence, I met my now boyfriend Dario, um, which the classic movie stuff and all,
Total meet cute.
So I met him. Yeah, whatever. No, so I met him on my first day in Florence, and we spent my 3 days together in Florence. Um, and then ended up talking like every single day after that. It was crazy, and did long distance for a year, traveling and visiting each other. Then he came to New York for a year in December 2019. He stayed for a year. We stayed in New York together, and then in January 2021 we moved back to Italy together. And now I'm here, a year and a half later.
What a whirlwind. And probably not exactly what you thought you would happen when you took yourself off to Italy.
Oh gosh, no. I was just expecting like plates of pasta and pizza, which I would not have been mad about if that was all that was. But no, it was like this beautiful extra thing that happened on the trip. Yeah.
So Dario did move to the USA to be with you. What were the factors that made you guys decide after 1 year to not stay in the States?
Yeah. Okay. Well, it was he came to New York at just a wonderful time. It was like December 2019 he arrived, and then 3 months later the COVID
Oh,
pandemic
right,
hit.
of course. Gosh.
Yeah, and so it was actually, silver lining because we were together, instead of having to be long distance for that time. But um, yeah, and so he was very fortunate to have a job where he could still work throughout the year.
Because he's a
And
chef.
then toward yeah, because he's a chef. So yeah, sucks, right? Anyway, um, I'm a professional. I was a professional dancer in New York. That's like was my career. That's what I grew up doing. And when COVID happened, my industry like completely shut down. Basically, even if I wanted to do it, I couldn't do it anymore. And it was crazy because when I couldn't do it anymore, I realized that I wasn't wanting to go to class. I was relieved I didn't have to go to auditions. I was feeling that way, which I was like, oh, I probably should listen to that and realize maybe I wasn't as happy doing what I was doing as I thought I was. So I took a little break throughout that year. And then toward the end of the year, Dario's visa was up. And because of COVID, because of everything that was happening in the US, um, getting a renewal visa for him was just impossible. It wasn't going to happen. So that's when I brought up, well, why don't we try Italy? Like, my industry shut down. I have no idea what I'm doing. Like, let's give Italy, a go for 6 months. Give it a try. And here we are a year and a half later. So
Such a high pressure kind of situation under which to be establishing and continuing a relationship and having to make those decisions too. I know so many people have made life-changing decisions during and following the height of this pandemic.
Yeah, it was, but at the same turn, I'm very fortunate that Dario, like, he is such a supportive partner, and we are very on the same page with each other. And so, when we were discussing back and forth, it was a very open discussion and just like listening to each other's needs and wants. And yeah, it just all worked out very nicely. But yeah, I mean, it's not easy to make a decision when you're in the middle of a of a pandemic as well, obviously. Looking back on it, there was a lot of silver linings that happened, because if, we had never gone through that, I would never have realized that I needed a change, and that, I probably would have been too scared to make the decision to move to Italy, because I would have been in the mindset of I have to be a dancer in New York and blah, 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 without having the opportunity to see what was on the other side of that. So yeah, it all worked out basically. Yeah.
Absolutely. And the other side of that for you has been social media fame. So
Oh
you've
gosh.
developed an online community of more than 1 million people. Was that
Yeah.
something, because we know that people can be very intentional with their social media these days. There are so many
Yeah.
content creators out there. Were you one of those people who started posting content about Italy with the hope that maybe you'd go viral?
Oh my God. No, Carly, no. Like literally, like it's so funny. It was the biggest accident on the planet. Like truly was like if you had told me a year ago that what would be happening now would be happening, I would have thought that you were off your rocker. No, it was a complete accident. We were on the plane moving to Italy. Um, and I had never posted on TikTok. I had never posted on Instagram. I used it for like videos of cats and cooking. Like I really did not even know how to use these platforms. Honestly, I still don't even know how to use these platforms. I'm winging it. But anyway, we were sitting on the plane, moving to Italy. And I made like this compilation video because I heard this really pretty song. And so I made a compilation video of Dario and I's relationship, just purely to show him, purely to be like, look. So I did that and then uploaded it, and then I turned off my phone for 17 hours while we were traveling to Italy. Um, got here, opened up my phone, and realized that the video had gone viral. And I was
Wow, it
like,
happened
oh,
that
okay.
quickly.
Yeah, it was crazy. I was like, oh, wow. And then we were in mandatory quarantine for 2 weeks. So I was like, well, I'm bored. Like, what else am I going to do but like make some videos? Because I was learning all this interesting stuff. And it was more honestly for me at first, it was just for me to like put something out on the internet of all these things that I was learning and all these mistakes that I was making, because there was a bunch and there still is a bunch. Um, and I found that, other people either were making the same mistakes as I had, or were interested in learning about the mistakes that I was making, and just learning more about this culture. And yeah, it just grew to something bigger than I could have ever imagined. I'm very grateful. Yeah.
So you'd been to Italy before you moved, but what did you really know about Italy and the Italian culture when you first came to Italy to live?
I really didn't know much, because I think that there's a lot of things like you can Google, of course, like you can use the internet to you can research and only learn so much. But at the end of the day, like there's only so much that you can learn by searching at on the internet. There's a lot of things that you really don't know until you experience them yourself. And those were the things that were tripping me up. It's all the little things like, gosh, I don't even know, like Italian hand gestures and what they mean, or just like language stuff that was happening, or, you can't go outside with wet hair, no cappuccinos after 12. Like it's all these random little
You can't go
things that I just
outside
like
with wet
never,
hair?
oh, no, 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 the Italian nanas. No, 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 you'll get sick. I'm like the queen of going out with my hair wet, and I learned very quickly that that is a no-no. So yeah, it's just all those little things that you would just never think to Google, that you just kind of have to experience yourself. And those are the things that I was like, oh, I better post this so other people don't make the same mistake.
And on the back of these posts, you've really established a bit of a career for yourself. But was that your
Yeah.
intention? Because, you were a performer in New York, you were coming to Italy. What was your initial plan for work when you got to Italy?
Honestly, I did not have one. I hate saying that, but it was really like I was when I moved here, I was already teaching English online for a company, just like as a part-time job. And I was like, well, I can do that in Italy because I'm on a study visa. I'm studying Italian at an academy here. And you can work part-time on a study visa. And then so I was like, oh, I'll teach English on the other side. And that was my plan. And that's what I did for the first 6 months. Um, but I didn't have, after that, I was like, I don't really know. I guess we'll see where where it takes me, where life takes me, which is crazy because I'm a very type A person. I like to have things planned out. From the age of 3, I was like, I'm going to be a dancer in New York. And that was what I did. And so to kind of go into it and have to be very open to receiving whatever life threw at me was a big change, but one that I'm very grateful that I did because it wouldn't, you know, it wouldn't be where it is today. So
And following your stories, it seems like a lot of doors have opened on the back of you going viral on social media. So can you tell me about some of the
yeah.
projects that you're able to do now?
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I'm really, yeah. So I started my own business, which I'm probably the most proud of. Because I realized very early on that I just like, I've always had a passion for travel and I've always wanted to help people travel here. And I knew I wanted to do something when everything started growing. I knew I wanted to do something and put it all in one place. And so I created my business, which is Casey Rose Travel. And I sell ebooks on there. I have a blog. I offer travel consultations to help people like plan their trips and plan their itineraries here. And then I also I'm starting to offer group trips, which I'm really excited about and a little nervous, but mostly excited. So we're doing 4 group trips this year to Italy, which is going to be exciting.
Casey, I want to get into some common misconceptions and Italian
Yeah, tell
culture
me.
shocks because you share so much of that on your social media
Yeah.
channels. And I know I have learned a lot. And you do
Good.
live with a chef as well. So I really want to start
Yeah.
with food. And can I just say
Oh yeah.
personally, the biggest shock for me, I lived with an Italian flatmate in London for about 4 months. And
Uh-huh.
one of the things she said to me was that chicken parmigiana, which is such a celebrated dish in Australia, doesn't exist. Not a thing.
No, it does
Not
not.
really Italian.
No, it is not. There's eggplant parm. Eggplant parm is Italian, but not chicken parmesan. In fact, Italians do not put chicken on pasta. It's like a cardinal rule. You do not put chicken on pasta. You had your pasta first, and then you had your chicken for your second plate. Um, for Americans, I would say it's probably fettuccine Alfredo. I can't
But
tell
that
you like
is
how many
so
Italian
classic.
restaurants. You would think, but it's not classic Italian, it's Italian American, or at least
Okay.
the version that Americans know it as. I think that's probably the biggest one. I'm not sure how it is not in London or Australia if fettuccine Alfredo is a big thing, but it's probably the one that I've heard the most controversy on because technically, the dish was invented in Rome, technically, but the original dish is only butter and Parmesan cheese. That's it, butter and Parmesan cheese. When Italian immigrants came to the US, they obviously had to adapt to American taste. They had to adapt to new products, things like that. So they started adding cream to it in order to like adapt to American taste, which is the version that Americans know it as. It's a thicker, creamier, heavier sauce. You will never find fettuccine Alfredo on a restaurant menu in Italy, ever, because butter and Parmesan cheese, the original fettuccine Alfredo, is a dish that Italians actually eat at home when they're sick. So why would they go get it at a restaurant?
Is
Because
it
they eat it
like
at home
the
when they're sick.
Italian chicken soup or something?
Kind of, yeah. Yeah, they eat it when
Wow.
they're sick. They eat butter and Parmesan cheese pasta at home. And so no Italian is going to order it off of the menu. So the
Yeah.
only place that you'll find quote unquote fettuccine Alfredo is at the original restaurant in Rome. And that's pretty catered to tourists. But if you see fettuccine Alfredo on any other menu in Italy, you are at a tourist trap and you got to run away. It's not authentic Italian.
I'm guessing they don't do pineapple on pizza in Italy either.
Don't even mention it. They'll kick you out. I'm scared about it.
That's one thing that I have learned in my adult life after growing up in Australia, where we load pizzas with so much stuff. They just
Yeah.
don't put as many toppings on pizzas in Italy.
But they do though, but it's different things. That's the
Okay.
crazy part is like they pineapple pizza is like a mortal sin. Like, don't do it. But the thing that gets me, which is so funny to me, is that they also have pizza. It's mostly for kids, but they have it on restaurant menus. It's hot dog and French fry pizza.
Oh, now,
And I'm like, wait a second.
not
Wait
meaning
a
to be
second.
rude, but that sounds more American than Italian.
And they call it an American style pizza.
Oh, that's funny.
I was like, how interesting is that? But no, they don't eat pineapple on pizza. But another thing about pizza, which was really shocking to me, is that you don't share pizza in Italy. Like you don't put a pizza in the middle of the table. I don't know, maybe in London they do that. In the US they do that, but in Italy you don't put a pizza in the middle of the table and everybody shares. Everybody has their own personal pizza. Um, it would be weird if you shared a pizza.
Can
And
you do a
I
half and
thought that was
half?
crazy.
Because we love a half and half
No,
in Australia.
I guess you could ask for it, but I don't think I've ever seen anybody do that. Isn't
Oh,
that so strange? And that's so interesting that you have your own personal pizza. And I would think like if I ate an entire pizza in the US by myself, I would get sick. But here, you don't leave feeling sick.
I was going to say, I can down a whole pizza myself anyway, so I wouldn't be so disappointed about that.
It's not the worst thing to happen, no.
No. One thing I did enjoy on your Instagram was I think you were in Sicily and you were having an ice cream sandwich for breakfast. And I thought, okay, this is
Oh,
somewhere I need to go.
oh my gosh, Sicily, yes. It's brioche con gelato or granita is something that they have down in Sicily, which is like a kind of Italian ice-ish, but it's like different flavors. So there could be like pistachio or like nocciola, which is hazelnut. And you get it served with a brioche bun, and you dip your brioche bun in your ice cream, and that's your breakfast. It's very
That's
common
amazing.
breakfast. I know. I was like, they got it made down here. My gosh.
And I'm a big coffee snob being from Melbourne. And I've always been told that if you order a latte in Italy, they'll just give you hot milk. Is that actually a thing, or are they a little bit more savvy to what tourists are actually looking for? And would they be that mean?
Um, if you order a latte in Italy, you will get a cup of milk because latte in Italian means milk.
Milk.
Um, and so the chances are that they will give you a glass of milk. Now, if you are in like a touristy city center, they might be like, do you mean cafe latte? Like, do you mean a lot like coffee latte? And
Milk
that's when you can be like,
coffee.
oh yeah, yeah, like milk and coffee. But if you're like in a rural place and you ask for a cup of milk, like you're gonna get a cup of milk. And then even sometimes in city centers, if they want to mess with somebody, they'll give them a glass of milk. But in general, I find the Italians are very kind and accommodating and they know what tourists mean. So they'll try to be like, I think you mean this, right? Um, so yeah, but I have received a glass of milk before on my first coffee trip and I didn't know any better. So
And I'm a big milk coffee person at any time of day. But even I find here in France, people might have a milk coffee at breakfast, but they won't have it the rest of the day. It's just purely black coffees. Is that the same
yeah,
culture in Italy?
yeah. Well, so cappuccino is like the biggest like milk coffee drink in Italy. But it's kind of a rule, quote unquote rule, that you don't have cappuccino after 12. And you can have it after 4, but you can't have it for that in between time for lunchtime because it's too heavy. So most people either just drink cafe, just espresso, or if you want like a little bit of milk, like a macchiato, which has like a tiny little bit of milk and it's kind of like a compromise between cappuccino and espresso. But yeah, no, I find the same thing. Italians don't really, it's black coffee and it's like strong and quick and small.
I would probably need to have 6 of them to feel I'd probably be bouncing off the walls after 6 of them, but
I thought so too. I was like, oh, I need like 2 or 3 of
I'm
these
a
and let's get
quantity
me going. Oh
person,
my
you know?
gosh.
Yeah.
No, they are so strong. It's so strong. But I'm the same way. I love having like a big coffee that I can sip
Yeah.
on like
Give me
throughout
a
the
giant
day. Like one of
mug.
my I'm like, let's go. I'm ready. But here, no, here they are small and they're quick, which was an adjustment. It was an adjustment. So
So living with a chef and obviously just being absolutely immersed in Italian food culture, what's one thing that you've learned that has been like the most eye-opening for you, or that has changed the way that you prepare and eat food?
Oh, a couple things, but the biggest one is don't break the spaghetti. That's the biggest lesson I
Ah,
learned right away. Don't break the spaghetti.
when
That's
you're
the biggest
boiling
lesson I
it.
learned right away. You're supposed to just let it stay one whole piece. And I remember the first time I broke it in front of Dario, and they have this saying that if you break pasta in front of Italian, it's like you're breaking their arm. But because Dario was also a chef, when I broke pasta in front of him, it was not only like I broke his arm, it was like I ripped it off his body. Literally, like it was the worst thing that has ever happened. It was so funny. It was so funny. But I don't break the pasta anymore. I'm proud to announce that I no longer break the pasta. So
I want to move on to language learning, Casey. Did you already
yeah,
have some high school Italian before you moved to Italy?
no, I didn't know any Italian. I am kind of ashamed to say now because I wish I had started learning it when Dario and I were living in New York together. But there was the pandemic and a lot was happening in everybody's minds during that, so I didn't even think about it. But I started learning when I moved to Italy, which was a big adjustment and probably one of the most and still is one of the most challenging aspects about living here. Definitely.
I mean, you are in Florence, which I I've never been there, but I understand it's a pretty established international student town, for example, big tourist town. Does that help you get through daily life a bit easier with limited Italian?
Yeah, it does. And I'm grateful that I do live in, a city that is so tourist friendly in that sense of just like everybody speaks at least some level of English. Like worst case scenario, we can fall back on English as a safety net. But I also live in a residential part of Florence, and a lot of the people around here are Italians and they speak Italian. And so English isn't something that, I can normally communicate with on a daily basis here. And just, also dealing with, you know, even the simple things like filling out paperwork and going to like the immigration government office that's all in Italian. Like it's just those little challenges that make it would be so much easier if I spoke Italian fluently. But then on top of that, just to like add another thing on top, like I never want to I always want to be respectful of the fact that like I am living in Italy. I should
Hmm.
learn
You're
Italian
in their
because it is a
country.
national language here. I would
Yeah.
never want to like assume somebody speaks English. I would never want to like I want to at least try to speak their language. It's my ultimate goal to learn Italian. Just because I think it's the respectful thing to do. I'm in their country. I can learn their language. They don't have to resort to me, speaking English to me in order to get by. That's not how it should be. So
And so you mentioned that you wish you'd started learning Italian before you moved. And I think, hindsight is a beautiful thing. And so many people have, even myself, have that regret. Why didn't I
yeah,
choose French in high school instead of
I know.
Japanese?
Yeah. Yeah, and I learned Spanish in high school, which I studied it for like 8 years. I don't remember any of it now, especially now that I'm learning Italian. I do not remember any Spanish because the languages are so close together that I
Right.
forget
I
it.
was
I
going to
can't remember
say,
Spanish at
there are
all.
some similarities. So have you like muddled
There
Spanish and
are.
Italian or?
Well, so when I first started learning Italian, if there was a word that I didn't know, for some reason I would like suddenly remember it in Spanish and I people would be able to understand what I was saying, which
Mm-hmm.
was kind of crazy.
Because it's so
But again, now
close.
that I'm learning Italian, yeah, but now that I'm learning Italian, like forget it. I can't remember any Spanish. It's just like I can focus on one language at a time. I applaud people that can speak more than two languages because like holy moly,
Oh,
it is
completely.
not easy to keep all that straight. Like wow.
And we
It's
all have
hard.
different methods of learning. So what has been like your, best learning method that you've kind of figured out?
I always try when I go out, I always speak in Italian. And if somebody starts speaking in English to me, I say in Italian, I say, I'm actually learning Italian. Can we speak in Italian? Because I'm trying to learn. And I find that, Italians are, because it's not a language that many people choose to study, Italians are actually very excited when you are learning Italian and when you try to speak Italian. So much so that they usually are like, oh, well, actually, so it's actually un, not una. Like they give me like tips
Ah,
and pointers, which is really cute.
I think that's
And
really
very
brave
helpful.
because I know when I'm out and about and I speak French, and if someone replies to me in English, I just immediately assume I've messed it up. And so I just continue in English because I'm so shy to be like,
Oh yeah.
actually,
Well,
I'd
no,
like
it
to
can be
try
so
again,
discouraging.
Yeah.
Yeah, it can be so discouraging, and that's how I was at first too. And then I hit like the a year mark, and I don't know what happened, but it was like from one day to the next, I was like, F it, like I gotta learn somehow. So I was like,
Nobody knows me.
I because I was yeah, I was like, I'm so because I was so nervous to speak, and sometimes I still get really nervous to speak. But like at the end of the day, how are you going to get any better if you don't make the
It's true.
mistakes? And at this point, I'm like, you know what? If I make a mistake, at least I'm trying, and that should come for something. So yeah,
Yeah.
French is hard though. I can't even imagine trying to learn French.
I think it's the same in Italian with the gendered words.
Oh my gosh, that's the hardest part when you come from English,
Yeah.
is the gendered. Yeah,
And just that,
it's
like,
really hard.
I keep wanting to fit a circle into a square. Like I want to literally translate everything, and French will not be literally
Yes.
translated, and that makes me so frustrated.
Yes, same. Oh my gosh. Same. And like you can't translate it literally. And I'm just like sitting there trying to translate it, and it's just not making sense because you can't do that. You have to like learn certain phrases and just have them be what they are instead of trying to translate them into English. It's really difficult. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah,
Can
it just
relate.
messes with all the logic in my brain. I wonder if you have this same experience with Dario. I have a French boyfriend, and I wasn't sure how literal French stereotypes were when we got together. And then one night I heard him upstairs playing video games, and suddenly he got really, intensely focused on something or upset. And he goes, "Oh, la, 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 la." And I just went, oh my God, it's for real. They really do say that. And the more la 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 la's they say, like the more intense the situation is.
Oh my gosh. Yes.
Are there some Italian cliches like that actually are for reals that just make you happy inside?
Yes. Mamma mia.
Mamma
Mamma
mia.
mia is something that they actually say. Yes, they say mamma mia, and it's their version of like, oh my gosh, or like, oh my God. Like
Yeah.
they say like, oh, like I don't even know, like, oh, and then she went to the store like later on, mamma mia. Like it's like this, mamma mia. And I lost my mind when I heard somebody say it casually the first time. I was like, what? Crazy, crazy. I was like, I thought that stuff just happened in movies, but no, it's real. People do say it often. We don't have air conditioner here. It's so hot. So I have a fan blowing on me.
Same.
It's so bad.
France and air conditioning is not a thing, and
No,
drives me
not here
crazy.
either. Not here either. Not very much. It's like 100 degrees, or well, what is that in? It's like nine. Oh my gosh, what is that? 38 degrees
Yeah, close
Celsius
to 40.
here.
That's
It's
hot.
freaking hot.
Yeah, it's the same here
It's
in
hot.
Strasbourg. So
Yeah.
how do Italians keep cool? Because I know here in France, some of the government advice is to like wet a towel and put it against your open window at night so the breeze comes through. Do you have like advice like that coming from your government?
Like, no, I don't know what it is. Like Italians just have it running through their veins. Like it's just like something that they're used to.
They just
And it
deal with
was
it.
so funny. I guess it was so funny because the other night, we were laying in bed, and I said to Dario, I was like, my love, I think we got to get an air conditioner. Like I'm dying over here. And he turns to me jokingly, but he was like, well, Casey, you're in the Mediterranean now. And I was like, what does that mean? And he goes, you have to get used to it. Joking, of course. But I turned to him and I was like, Dario, I was like, you have Mediterranean blood. running through your veins. My ancestors come from Eastern Europe. I've lived in Michigan and New York, in the northern part of the US. I was like, I am not used to this heat without air conditioner. Um, so yeah, they just get used to it. I saw it's crazy too because it's it's something that Italians have told me about how they can peg at least American tourists, probably tourists in general, but American tourists
Because
is
they look hot.
in hot, but also like in the summertime. I was walking out today and there were Italians wearing full length pants. I was like, are you guys insane?
I
But
saw a
then on the
woman on the
opposite
bus in
end,
a trench coat, and I was like, but
yeah, I was like,
it's a heat wave.
how? Brava, but like how? But it's so
Yeah.
funny because I've had my Italian friends, tell me when I've been like, well, how can you peg American tourists? And they're always like, well, you guys are wearing like shorts and dresses like in May. And I'm like, yeah, well, May is like the beginning of summer. And they're like, it's not summer. It's still cold. I'm like, no, it's not. But now I get it because Italians are outside in the middle of July wearing pants. It's crazy.
Half my family, it's from Malta, and
Oh my
I went
gosh.
there in late April, early May, and it was sunny, and I'm like, I am jumping in the water. And yeah, it was chill, but I was so excited to swim because I'd been
Yeah.
living in London and it was still cold, and here the sun was shining, and all the locals just looked at me like I was crazy because for them it's just not swimming weather yet.
Not
The
really gonna
water's
do.
still too
Yeah.
cold.
Oh yeah, no, it's the same thing here. Like I would wear a tank top in beginning of May, and even though, it was like, I don't know, it was warm enough for a tank top. People were like, you're gonna get sick if you wear that. You need the jacket. You're gonna get
Is this
sick.
like the wet
And I'm
hair
like,
thing?
huh, it is like the wet hair thing. Yeah, it is like the wet hair thing.
You've spoken in your Instagram stories about your previous career as a Broadway performer, and people ask you if you miss it. Um, and I used to work in radio. I understand people looking at your job and thinking it's so amazing, and how could you ever leave such a dream job? Do you
Mm.
ever have thoughts about whether you made the right call, especially, I suppose, now as in New York, Broadway's back open again?
I don't have any regrets, no, and I don't have any doubts that I made the wrong decision. I had gotten to a point where I love to dance. I love to perform. That's always going to be part of me. It's always going to be in my blood. I love to make people laugh and smile. It's just part of who I am. However, unfortunately, the industry is not one that I like very much. I had gotten to the point where I started to hate the industry um, so much that I started to hate dance. And I don't want to hate dance because I love to dance. There's a lot of rejection. There's a lot of toxicity. Um, and that started to translate into how I felt about performing. And that is not something I would ever want because it's such a core of who I am. And I don't want to hate that part of me. Um, and so I think, at the time it was like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? Like, I wonder if I'm making the right choice. But now I look back on it and it was probably the best choice I've ever made because it's allowed me to start a very healing relationship with um, performing and dancing. And there are times when I do miss it. Of course, I mean, again, it's such a big part of who I am. And there are times when I do miss it, but I don't regret at all. Because again, like it's in my blood. I'm always going to perform somehow. And like maybe I'll dance again. Who knows? Like I don't know, but I'm really happy with the life I've created. I'm really happy with where I am now and I'm really happy with where life takes me and I'm open to where it takes me next. So, we'll see. Yeah.
I think a lot of foreigners can relate to that. Expats can relate to that because it's so common to need to make a sacrifice with your career when you make a big life change, like move to another
Mm-hmm.
country, and keeping that sense of identity or finding a new sense of identity is
Mm-hmm.
such a common issue that, let's face it,
Mm-hmm.
women, expat women,
Yeah.
seem to go through quite a lot.
Yeah. And I think it's important to remember that like you can miss old aspects of your life. You can miss your old life and you're allowed to grieve. what you have given up while simultaneously embracing your new life. It's not, the two aren't connected. You're allowed to miss one while also embracing the new. And I think that's probably one of the most important things to remember, because there's this weird thing, and you probably can relate, but there's this weird thing that happens, especially when you've transferred your whole life to a new country with new customs and culture, and maybe even a new language, that what everybody sees is, oh my God, how lucky you are, like how beautiful, how amazing, like you're so lucky. And there are times when you feel like that. There are times when you feel like the luckiest person on the planet, right? But then on the other end of that, homesickness and, you know, what you've given up and what you miss comes out of freaking nowhere and hits you like a truck, like literally out of nowhere. And it can be like 1 minute you're on a high and the next minute you're on a low, right?
Yeah,
And then there
absolutely.
comes, yeah, and then there comes the complicated emotions with that of feeling guilty for feeling that way, because you should, quote unquote, you should be grateful. You should be, you know, feeling lucky for being where you are. And like, you're not allowed to feel those feelings of loneliness or sadness because you're in this beautiful, amazing, wonderful place. And it's just not true. It's, you know, that line of thinking will cause you to spiral down really, really quick. You have to, like, you know, it's complicated emotions, and it's a lot that goes into it when you transfer your whole life to another country. There's a lot that goes into it when you transfer your life to a different city, like let alone you know, across the ocean. But you got to let yourself feel those things, I think, and you got to let yourself not shove those down, because if you shove them down, the longer that you put them off, the harder it's going to be to deal with, and they will always be there, I think. I mean, again, I think maybe you can relate, but you will always have those feelings. You will always have those feelings. There are things like that you're allowed to be sad about, that you're allowed to miss, while also recognizing that you made the right choice. You know, it doesn't, they're not mutually exclusive, but it's hard. It's not easy. And it always comes in waves and it'll always be there. So I think it's about like recognizing that and feeling the feelings when you feel them, and knowing like what you can do to help that is like the first steps. And recognizing that it's normal too. Like, gosh, like we all go through it. And I feel like these feelings of guilt that we all have about feeling sadness or feeling homesickness, like I feel like those feelings are like always hush hush, like don't talk about them, don't share about them, because you're going to seem like you're ungrateful. And
Hmm.
it's just like, that's like, we're not going to do that. Like, we got to recognize that it's a very real part of moving abroad.
Some people back home to me have been like, oh, your life is just so exciting and you're living a dream life in France and all this kind of stuff. And sometimes I think, yeah, it's pretty cool. And I have to remind myself of that sometimes, because a lot of the time it's pretty mundane and I go through the exact same life stuff that everybody else goes through, except I'm having to navigate it in another language, which adds
Yeah.
like another layer of complexity to the simplest things
Yeah.
sometimes.
Oh my gosh, even like going to the grocery store. My gosh,
Hmm.
the first time I went to the grocery store here, forget it. I had a breakdown. I was like, I can't do this. It's like
That
so
was me in the post office.
stressful. Yeah.
Weighing
Oh,
my
the post office,
vegetables,
forget about it. Oh my
I got
gosh, forget it.
completely scolded by the lady in
Yeah,
the checkout at the
me
supermarket
too.
because I
Me
didn't put the
too.
stickers on my fruit and vegetables. And I'm like, I
Do
didn't
you have
realize.
to do that in France? You have to do that in France too. We have to
Yes.
do that in Italy, and I didn't know. I had no idea. Oh, I got
You're like
scolded too. Don't
such a
worry, it's okay.
doofus.
Oh, don't worry about it. And the post office, forget about it. No, it's just so funny
Oh,
because, you know, there is that part of it where, you know, of course, like you're living in this beautiful place and like it's stunning. And of course, but at the other end of that, you're also living in this place. You're not
I
just
just want to
visiting, you're
send a
living, which
letter. I
means
just want to send
you
a
have to
letter.
do, yeah, which means there's other things that you have to,
Hmm.
you have to deal with. And those are everyday life things, except in our cases, we're doing them in a different language. Even if you're not doing them in a different language, they're still freaking annoying because it's not your, your country of citizenship. And so it can be really, really difficult.
But in spite of all the difficulties, there are so many people, from students to people, wanting to give their children an international upbringing, to people approaching retirement age who absolutely dream of living the good life in Italy. So, what
Mhm.
would you suggest are the top pieces of advice that you could give And I know the advice probably changes depending on what stage of life you're at too, perhaps. But what's your top pieces of advice for people looking to make a move to Italy?
Gosh, I think it ties into a bit what we were saying before. I think the biggest piece of advice I can say is like, take a deep breath, recognize that it's not always going to be easy, but it is 100% worth it. Luckily, and I say this because I do it, but also luckily now social media is so prevalent and like there are ways to connect with other people that you normally would never be able to talk to through online platforms where you can receive help, advice, suggestions, things like that. There's so many Facebook communities, Facebook community groups for immigrants in Italy, expats in Italy. Foreigners in Florence is a Facebook group here, and people post questions all the time. And luckily, we have that now, which is such a valuable resource.
So
Such a valuable
useful.
resource.
I
So like
just joined People
it's
Renovating
yeah,
in France and I've had to mute the group because there's
yeah,
just so much information coming through that I'm overwhelmed.
yeah,
But
yeah.
it's a
And
good
I'd say
problem to
like, I
have.
mean, no, it is, but I'd say
Mm.
like that's probably another piece of advice is like find these local community groups, find the people who also transferred, find the expats, find the immigrants because they have gone through the same thing that you have. And luckily now it's easier to find them because of social media, because of these platforms, because we're in this digital world where you can connect with other people that have gone through this before. So find those people and lean on them because they know and they've gone through it. I've gotten so much advice and so many questions answered by people that I've never met in real life. So, yeah.
And now you're the one dishing out that advice to other people, which is great.
Oh gosh, I'm glad. I'm glad. I'm glad that the videos are helpful because again, it's just every mistake I've ever made put on the internet for everybody to see. So, I'm glad it's helpful.
I have one final question on that note, Casey, because I was watching one
Tell
of
me.
your videos the other day and I realized this trend that has been all over Instagram and TikTok of people doing that hand gesture to the da 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 song. And they're talking about things that just make sense. And then you
Yeah.
pointed out that hand gesture does not mean what you think it means.
No. No, oh my gosh. So that hand gesture, the typical like, Italian one that, everybody uses when they talk about Italy, that gesture means basically, and I don't know if it's okay to swear in here, but I'm going to say it anyway. It means what are you doing? Like, what are you saying? Um, yeah, that's what that gesture means. And it's so funny because all my Italian friends, like when that trend started going viral, even Dario turned to me, he's like, why is everybody doing that hand gesture? Like it doesn't make sense in the video. Um, and so I was I'm glad that I could maybe steer,
I'm
in the right
I'm just
direction.
so glad I didn't make one of those videos because was reading that it's meant it maybe it started in sarcasm that people were saying things that just make sense when they're actually ridiculous, but people
I
aren't
think that's
using it
probably
that
where
way.
it was born. I think that's probably where it was born. It was probably the things that make sense, but it was in a sarcastic way, in which way the hand gesture would make sense. But I think, an important thing to remember because, those trends in the Italian hand gestures, they go viral. And of course, because Italians do talk with their hands. Yes, they do. Um, I think it's important to remember that the gestures actually do have meaning and they actually are a part of the language. Like they really do use their hands to express words and communicate. It's a form of communication, the Italian language that has been there for centuries. And so, like, if you're going to do it, make sure you're maybe doing it the right way, just to be respectful, Yeah.
Yeah,
But that's
yeah,
funny, though.
it's completely
That's
scared
funny.
me off doing any in social media hand gesture trend
No,
now.
oh my God. No, don't let it scare you. Don't let it scare you. It's a part of the language, and they will correct you if anything, but it's all lighthearted fun. So yeah.
Well, Casey, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat to you for the Expat Focus podcast. Thank you so much
You
for your
too.
time. And I look
My
forward to
gosh, thank you for
following
having me.
your Italian summer adventures. You're doing a few tours, aren't you?
Yeah. Oh gosh, I'm doing 4 tours. So we have the first one actually in a week and a half, which is crazy. And then the end of August, and then mid-September and beginning of October. So it's going to be a crazy couple of months, but I'm excited.
I look forward to seeing where you're going to take me throughout Italy through the power of Instagram.
Oh my gosh, I can't wait to have you along. Thanks for having me, girl.
That's it for today. If you want to hear more about life in Italy, search our YouTube channel or your favorite podcast app for this episode, Running a B&B in the Italian Countryside. Subscribe to the Expat Focus newsletter for monthly updates. You can sign up at expatfocus.com, and I'll catch you next time.